Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove. I'm here today with another book review. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Harleen by Stepan Sejic. And this is a book that is really quite recent. The run itself, the three-part miniseries Harleen, came out in 2019, so it's just a couple of years old. And yet already, in just a short amount of time, relatively speaking, it's already considered by many to be something of an instant classic when it comes to Harley Quinn stories. So today I wanted to do my usual thing, give an overview of this book and, share my thoughts on it and see what I think of it and let you all know what I think of it. So first things first, this particular version of the book that I have has this really cool lenticular dust cover design. So it's kind of a plastic design which allows you to see through to the book underneath and forms as a kind of mask for the book itself, which is fitting considering what the cover actually is. And underneath you get the design of the book itself, which is this very striking, quite disturbing image, I will say. Now, before we even go any further, this is probably as good a time as any to point out, as we stare at this particular bloody image, that this is part of DC's Black Label imprint, which they do now, which is basically a series of out-of-continuity stories that they use to explore somewhat more mature storytelling than they do in their mainstream continuity, and allows creators to tell stories without having to worry about the repercussions to the mainstream continuity that they would have to do otherwise. So with that in mind, I will say now, before I open the book and go through any of it, that this is quite a mature story. It's intended for mature readers, so worth pointing that out because there is a fair amount of violence in here, and it could be considered a little bit disturbing in some parts if you're not expecting that. I don't think it's particularly extreme or intense, in my opinion, anyway. But I just want to put that fair warning out there, as that is technically something that it is intended to be. So the book itself, you get this standard kind of blurb on the back, and this story is basically an origin for Harley Quinn. So it explores a version of events that show how Harleen Quinzel became Harley Quinn, how she met the Joker, how she got involved with him, and how she ultimately went down the path of becoming a villain and entering into the kind of warped relationship that she has with the Joker. Now it is written and drawn by Sejic, and that guy has a very difficult name to pronounce, so if I'm mispronouncing it, apologies now, I will say that, but I'm doing my best, I assure you. But yeah, I think firstly, he's just an excellent artist, and really throughout this entire book, this entire mini-series, I think it's technically a mini-series, or a magazine format series, don't actually know what it's technically called, but anyway, it's a three-part story. All three parts are in here, separated into books 1, 2, and 3, so you start off with book 1. And yeah, so I'm just going to flick through, there may be some spoilers in here because, I'm just going to flick through the book and talk about a few key things. If you don't want to know anything specific, if you don't want me to ruin any of the book for you, I understand. And in that case, fair warning, you might not want to continue watching this just for the time being. But if you've already read it, if you're already familiar with it, by all means stick around and we'll have a look through. So yeah, what will probably and hopefully be immediately apparent as I look through this and showcase some of the pages is just how good the artwork is. Sejic has this really kind of realistic style. I think he kind of came onto the scene and became well known firstly by having written and drawn, I think, a series called, Sunstone, for Image Comics. But nowadays, he's doing work for DC, etc. as well. And this particular story, I think, is a highlight of his work. It's really well told. The whole thing is told from Harley's perspective, or Harleen's perspective, really, because for the majority of this story, this is pre her becoming Harley Quinn. And it's kind of, her retelling her own story. So it's a first-person narrative told from her perspective throughout. And yeah, so it contains some of the kind of story thread that you'd probably expect from a Harley origin. So you've got the introduction of the Joker, who, this kind of sort of Tom Hiddleston looking Joker, It's kind of what he reminds me of a little bit. Tom Hiddleston's Loki. And yeah, so she just sort of witnesses him committing random crime in the street, and she's sort of instantly captivated by him a little bit. But it's not that simple. It's not literally just she sees the Joker, she falls in love with the Joker, and simple as that. There's more to it. Throughout the book, you get a few appearances by Batman, not too much, because it's not a Batman story first and foremost, of course, but he does appear, mostly in these confrontations with the Joker, which Harleen is witnessing. But honestly, stunning artwork, really beautiful stuff through here. But effectively, yeah, so she is working as a psychologist. She's interested in studying the criminally insane as a means of trying to treat them, basically, because she doesn't want to believe that people who are condemned to Arkham Asylum are literally hopeless. She doesn't think that they deserve to just be left to rot, effectively. She thinks they should be treated, even when many other people do not feel the same way. So she ends up going to Arkham, interviewing different inmates, spending time with them as a means to try and, conduct her own research and ultimately try and prove her theories. But of course, of all the inmates there, the one that makes the biggest impact on her is, of course, the Joker. And he gets into her head, manages to manipulate her, and by the end of the story, of course, she has become Harley Quinn. But the road that gets there, the specific plot points that you see take her from A to B, so to speak, really interesting to see. And I think it's handled really, really well, both in terms of the writing and the artwork. So just the general storytelling, really, by Sejic is really top quality. And I was really surprised by this book. I didn't think it would be as good as it is. I'm not particularly a big Harley Quinn fan overall. I know that nowadays she's like a super famous, popular, iconic character. She's on merchandise everywhere. But she's not really one of my all-time favorites by any means. But I was thoroughly engrossed in this story. And it really made me like this version of the character a whole lot and feel a lot of sympathy for her. That's the thing, she's written very much sympathetically as a victim, really, as a victim of the Joker, as a good person who was manipulated into becoming a bad person. So in that way, it really showcases how much of a threat, how much of a danger the Joker is because of the kind of mind games he's constantly playing. And she falls victim to that, and she's very much portrayed as a sympathetic character in how she has these good intentions. She wants to do the right thing, but she's ultimately naive, really. I suppose she's too naive for her own good, and the Joker thoroughly takes advantage of that and takes advantage of her. So it is kind of sad. But I think that's exactly how the story should be for Harley Quinn, At least to me, that's a big part of why it worked so well and why I enjoyed it so much. But what I would say about this, and maybe this is quite a bold claim, but I would say as an origin story, this, for Harley Quinn, is really just as kind of seminal, just as much of a necessary read as Batman Year One is by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli as an origin story for Batman. So what Batman Year One is to Batman, I think Harleen is to Harley Quinn. And that's, that is saying something, because obviously Year One is an incredibly iconic story. It stood the test of time, mostly, in my opinion. And I will discuss that book another time as well, but it serves as a good comparison, I think. And I would say that this is very much, for me, the definitive Harley Quinn origin story, and really just the definitive Harley Quinn story full stop, so far anyway, from Harley Quinn books that I've read over the years. Nothing struck me as being such strong material as this did. I wouldn't be praising it this much if I didn't if I didn't really think that, and if I hadn't enjoyed it as much as I had when I read through it. But yeah, it honestly is just a really good story. By the end, she kind of, as you see through these pages here, she ends up killing for the first time. Kind of snaps, really. She kind of loses it, falls into the arms of the Joker. And by the very end, we kind of see her as Harley. But in a very powerful image. The final page is kind of shows that she's, even then, she's struggling. The good side of her, the sane side of her, still struggling, still battling against her. Really good stuff, guys. And then the variant cover gallery, which you get in the back, you get a few additional covers. And then, you know, a bit of bonus material in the back. I think it's some unused scenes. Nice inclusion. Really good stuff, honestly. If you are even slightly interested in Harley Quinn as a character, then I think that this is a book that you absolutely must check out. You really owe it to yourself to check out if you're a Harley fan. I couldn't really recommend it enough if you are. And it's certainly something I would recommend in general, to be honest. Even if, like me, you're not the biggest Harley Quinn fan, I still think this is a book that's well worth checking out. I'll just quickly say as well, forgot to mention at the beginning, the dimensions of the book, in terms of its height, it is the exact same height as an oversized hardcover or an omnibus, but it's a little bit wider. So it's about an inch or an inch and a half wider than an omnibus. So it will stick out a little bit on the bookshelf. It's a bit of an odd dimension for a book. I think it's technically classed as magazine format rather than book format. But anyway, yeah, a really good book, guys. And regardless of the dust cover having changed, that to me, that I would consider that to be irrelevant for the most part. And it's a book that I highly recommend checking out. So yeah, hopefully that's been useful for you, insightful. If this is a book you've had any interest in whatsoever, maybe I've helped make up your mind as to whether or not you feel like jumping in and having to read through it for yourself. But really, guys, yeah, I'm going to leave it for there for now. Just let me know if you have read this book before. What do you think of it? Or is it something you're interested in reading now? Either way, always happy to hear from you. But thanks again, guys, for watching. Appreciate the support as always, and I'll be back soon with another video.